Hello, you're listening to Storytelling Saga, the podcast that shares stories. I'm your host, Allie, and this week I'm discussing favorite books I read in elementary school. And growing up, we had reading logs every year where we had to read a certain amount of books on our own. And then I maybe sometimes do book reports and maybe sometimes oral reports. I can't remember exactly. I know as we got older then, it was more in-depth with our discussions and things like that. But in elementary school in particular, I remember we had a chart up with all of our names and then stickers next to our names to track our progress of how many books we had read thus far. So it's like, 12 stickers near your name, like you read 12 books so far, things like that. And for the I've always loved reading. So for the most part, these were just books I read on my own, but a couple of them are books that we read as a class. So when we had in class reading assignments that we would read all together, like our teacher would read it, and then as we got older, then we would just read a page or so as a class, like everyone takes a turn reading an excerpt from the chapter or whatever. And reading is so important for development as children in particular. So I already talked about my favorite children's books way back in episode 18 of this podcast. So I figured to now talk about my favorite books that I read in elementary school. And I have to start with the eternal classic, Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. And I didn't realize it was published back in 1952. I think when I read it, I don't even remember how old I was. I want to say 4th grade, but I feel like I was younger than that. And I believe that's a book we may have been assigned to read, because I remember we had to do a book report on it. But what a truly special, wonderful book. Absolutely timeless. I do remember also the animated feature I know it's been then remade in the live action version of it, but the animated one is wonderful. From, I believe, in the 70s it was released. But the message of this book is just so beautiful, and the themes of it, that it really tackles heavy stuff, in particular death. That the whole point of Charlotte's Web is to save Wilbur, the little pig, the runt of the litter pig, from being slaughtered. And I love the whole thing with him bonding with Fern, who just already loves Wilbur. I distinctly remember the scene with Fern when she's in class, I think, and then the teacher calls on her and she's just daydreaming, and she asks her a question. She says, Wilbur, like she's daydreaming about her pig, Wilbur, her pet pig. So that's so devastating that when he gets fatter, then like to be sent to be slaughtered. No, it's so sad, my gosh. But, we know the story. So I do remember we had to do a report on this because, I don't know, we were quizzed on it maybe, because I remember one of the questions being, what were the messages Charlotte wrote in her web? And the first one, of course, is some pig. And then the next one is terrific. The next one is radiant, and then humble. I remember in the movie that scene with Templeton when he has to go through the garbage or whatever, rooting through, looking for newspaper clippings that Charlotte can use to weave into her web. And I remember Charlotte is voiced by Debbie Reynolds in that animated feature. I remember I didn't like Templeton. He was just kind of a jerk, but then he was just kind of reluctantly helping out. And then, it's beautiful that she saves Wilbur, because when they see the messages, they realize, oh, wow, what's this pig? Maybe there's something special about him. So that's beautiful. But then it's so devastating when she's going to die, and Wilbur then, his last act with Charlotte is that he takes her little egg sack with her children, and all the little children fly away except for 3. The little 3 children. So 514 children. They're born at the barn. All but 3 of them fly away. And the 3 are Arania, Joy, which is the one Wilbur names, and Nellie. It's so cute. So, again, it tackles this heavy stuff about death and that it's inevitable, because with Charlotte, her whole purpose is that she saved Wilbur, but then tragically she dies because that's the life cycle of a spider. They don't live long. So it's just a beautiful book. It's an important book for kids. I love that book. Another one I love that I distinctly remember I read in 3rd grade was Holes by Louis Satcher, published in 1998. That book I read on my own, and I haven't actually seen the movie. Maybe I saw bits and pieces of the movie, but I never saw the full movie, the Disney version of it. Maybe that should be something I check out at some point. This is a book I've always actually wanted to revisit. I haven't read it since, I should revisit some of these books. I realize it doesn't matter that they're for little kids. They're just wonderfully written books. But anyway, this one in particular, I remember certain things about it. Like the whole premise of it is that the main character, Stanley Yelnats, is falsely accused of stealing sneakers, and he's sentenced to that camp where they have to dig holes that are 5 feet deep, 5 feet wide. And first off, I remember this was my first time learning about a palindrome, which is explained in the book. Stanley Yelnats, that his name is the same frontwards and backwards. So that was really cool and exciting to me. And then I remember like writing it out like, oh wait, yeah, it's right, Stanley Yelnats, front and back. And this one's just so great. The imagery of it, the characters, that kid Zero, like all those characters. By the end, then you see that it was all just them exploiting these kids because they're trying to find that treasure or whatever it was. And then thankfully his name is cleared at the end, Stanley. So again, absolutely wonderful book. And a whole series I absolutely loved in elementary school that I first read in second grade. Actually, our second grade teacher read it to us, was the Junie B. Jones series by Barbara Park. If you don't know Junie B. Jones, it always starts the same way with, "My name is Junie B. Jones. The B stands for Beatrice, except I don't like Beatrice. I just like B, and that's all." I always loved this series. So these were a lot of books I read then on my own, just as part of our reading. I would just read so many Junie B. Jones books. So they were published from 1992 to 2013, and that was when, sadly, the author Barbara Park passed away. But she had written a total of 28 books in the series. The first half of them were Junie B. Jones in kindergarten, which were the ones I read. And then Junie B. Jones went to first grade. But the first one our teacher read to us was issue number 5, Junie B. Jones and the Yucky Blucky Fruitcake. I'll never forget that. And this series is so wonderful. First off, it's really easy to read, really quick books to read. So we would read a lot of them. My friends and I too, they'd read these books as well. But that one will always be special to me. And I still to this day remember the imagery of it, that Junie B. Jones wins this fruitcake at the school carnival. She wins a fruitcake and a comb, and these prizes she doesn't like them. She finds the fruitcake ugly, and that it's this hard block of, like, it's just this hard inedible thing, and then it's like she can't eat it, she can't do anything with it. But the whole thing is then at the very end, then she kind of sees beauty in it when then like it's shining in the light or something, and then I just distinctly remember this, like when she's staring at it and then she realizes, oh, it's actually kind of pretty, and then then she likes her comb too. So appreciating things, not always just like seeing the value in things too. So I just love this series. I remember I loved the Valentine's one, when she gets like a Valentine from like that meanie Jim. Like she always had nicknames for people. Then there was like Lucille, who was like the rich brat. So then I went back and like would read the old ones. So starting with issue 1, which was Junie B. Jones and the stupid smelly school bus, and then Junie B. Jones in a little monkey business when she gets a new baby brother. But I remember the Valentine's one, and I remember laughing hysterically at the part when, and it was also funny too that her teacher, she just called her Mrs. She couldn't remember the teacher's last name, so she was just Mrs. the character. That's great, just Mrs. whatever. So Junie B. Jones, just like this little sassy kindergartner, and I remember like words would be misspelled because it's from the point of view of this character. So a truly, really fun series. But with that Valentine's one, I remember they would give Valentines to each other, the kids, and then Mrs. or something says, oh, Junie B. Jones, what do you think is in this box for you? And then she says, I thinked really hard. And then I said, a meatball or something like that. I remember that, finding that hysterical. So, loved those books. And another series I really liked, but to a lesser extent, was Horrible Harry by Susie Klein. There were a total of 30 books. And I remember like checking one of those out at our school library. And I liked it. I read a few of those. He was just basically a troublemaker, and he was in 3rd grade. I think I was in 3rd grade when I read those books. And I also liked when I was younger. I mean, who doesn't love the Arthur books by Mark Brown? The first one was published in 1976. With the Arthur books, pretty sure, like, I was a fan of the series, the animated series, before I started reading the books. Like, before I was like, oh, wait, so it's books too? I didn't know that. Anyway, the Arthur books, like, the older style, he had, like, a longer nose. So that first book with, like, he's self-conscious about his nose, and then with his eyes when he needs glasses. And the one thing I remember that stands out to me was that he had, like, Francine had a crush on him. And then there's that one when they just go on a date or something. And then he says, like, oh, okay, I'll give you a kiss. And then she closes her eyes, she's saying, Arthur. And then she's like, Arthur? And then it's just like Hershey's Kisses there. So that's cute. Another series I loved when I was getting a little older was The Babysitter's Club by Anne M. Martin, published between 1986 to 2000. So, solid run. And I think they made movies into that and everything. And I don't remember any, like, one specific thing. Like, I wish I could remember the first book I read from it, but I remember the girl Kristen. Well, the one thing I remember about it randomly was that there was one part where she got offended that the older brother, or whoever it was, the older sister, let her win at checkers or something. So she kind of felt she didn't, like, win on her own just because she's younger. But those were just great books too. And also I absolutely loved Judy Blume books. I think everyone growing up, because she wrote such a wide range of children's books, adolescent books in particular, but that's middle school. But because for me, one of my favorites is Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. But some of her elementary school age books, Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing and Freckle Juice. Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing, I remember the weird thing about that one is that when the little brother eats his turtle and then the turtle dies, like, goodness. But there are other books I read growing up that I wish I could remember, but these are just the ones that really stuck out to me. And also I just want to touch on, since it's related to reading in elementary school that so many of us experienced, were the Scholastic book fairs, going to those little fairs and picking out new books. Also, like, the catalogs with the Scholastic book fairs, like the items, and, like, looking through that and picking out things. I always loved that too. And I would always, mostly for the most part, read aloud with my mom. And sometimes she would read aloud to me with the books that were assigned to me for reading. I've just always loved reading. It's such a joy to read. It's, again, so important. It just takes you to new places. It broadens your imagination. And it does, as a writer too, it improves your writing. And, my love for reading has only grown over time. And these, again, were just some of the books that really stood out to me in reflecting on my favorite books when I was younger. I wish I could remember more, but these were just really some of my favorites in particular. And with that is going to conclude this week's episode of Storytelling Saga. You can follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at Storytelling Saga, as well as on Twitter at Storytell Saga. You can also send me any questions, comments, or writing prompts by leaving me a message in the contact section of storytellingsaga.com or by sending me an email at storytellingsaga@gmail.com. Next week, here it goes. I'll be discussing Kenan and Kel. Until then, thank you for listening, and remember, write what you love.